This is the IOA Podcast, a space for truth, tenderness, and becoming whole, one breath at a time. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Malika, and I am super excited to have you back here with us on the IOA podcast. Remember, this is a space where you can come, bring your whole self, and we do healing together as a community. So, if you have been rocking with me since season one, you already know that I do not take it lightly that you keep coming back, and I thank you for that genuinely. Before we get into the meat of the episode, I like to do a little housekeeping because this show is growing and I want to make sure we're building this community together with intention wherever you may be listening to the episode at. And so, first, I want to acknowledge all my listeners at WDJY in the city of Atlanta, Georgia. I do not take it for granted that you all have been with me since the end, well, the fall of 2025 and that you continue to stay with me and the numbers are showing that. And so I want to give a very special shout out to you all who are listening on WDJY. So for everyone else that is listening somewhere else, here's the first instruction I want to have you do. Hit subscribe and follow wherever you may be listening, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or any of the other platforms where podcasts are found. What it's doing is it's telling the platform that this show matters to you and it will matter to other listeners. And so you'll never miss an episode because when you click the button, it lets people know what's going on and it helps somebody who is searching for healing right now be able to get that in their life. So please, please, please make sure that you are hitting that like and subscribe. The next thing that I will say is that if you are on Apple Podcasts, so if you're listening there, please leave a review. 5 stars and even one honest sentence will make a huge difference on that platform. The reviews are gonna help new listeners trust that this is a space worth their time. So please take this time to do that. It also helps the IOA appear in recommendations and different searches within the platform. So if this show has served you, even in one small way, that is one of the best ways for you to say thank you. Next, I want you to remember that we are going to share one episode this week. It could be today's episode, it could be a previous episode, it could even be an episode from season one. Think about a person in your circle who has been quietly carrying something that is extremely heavy. It could be stress, it could be grief, they could be just deeply tired and exhausted, and their sleep is not fixing the issue. Send them an episode. Tell them why it made you think of them. That is community care in action. That's what this show is about, and it costs you nothing but a moment of intention. And so remember where you can find the show. Highway Podcast is found on Apple Podcasts, it's found on Spotify, iHeartRadio. If you like the videos, it's also found on YouTube and everywhere podcasts are found. And so the links to the platforms will be in the show notes. And I think that we are ready to get into today's conversation because this one has been sitting with me for a while. And I believe someone needs to hear this today. So, just looking at where we have been over the last several weeks, we have been on a arc intentionally with this season. We started out in season one, really digging into better understanding the concepts in the book that are the foundation for this podcast. And from there, we now are building in season two on things that are intentional, relevant, and current. So we began talking about in season two with beginning again after burnout, grief, and disappointment. And we talked about healing and community. We also talked about what social media is quietly doing to our bodies and our sense of self worth. That was one episode that I felt was very, very important and very, very intentional to have. And with that particular episode, it was important for us to dig into something that is a part of our daily lives that we don't realize is having a negative impact on our life. From there, we went into talking about holding space for public grief and how we can do it with dignity. We talked about Black joy and about how to reclaim our attention in an age of relentless engineered overload with all of the things that are just around us. But today, I want to turn our our focus towards something that is very practical, that I feel like is also very present and very personal for so many of us right now. And I want to talk about affordability. And specifically, I want to talk about affordability, stress, talk about in relationship to food and survival, and what it really means to try to heal when life gets expensive. So, the title of this episode is simply Affordability, Stress, Food, and Survival, Healing When Life Gets Expensive. And it really is anchored in two of the most grounding chapters, I believe, in Rooted in Resilience, the one about the table and the one about the disruption. So we did get into the disruption again previously last week in last week's episode. So there's never not a time that we won't be revisiting these chapters within the book. And what these two chapters are really asking of us is to tell the truth about something that millions of people are carrying quietly every single day of their life. Here is the thing about survival stress. It does not only show up in dramatic emergencies, it doesn't only show up looking like a crisis. So sometimes we're expecting it to look like something obvious, right? Standing in the grocery store aisle, going through doing the mental math on what you can afford, filling your chest tighten as you are doing the calculation, and then having to put stuff back on the shelf because it's not in the budget. That's an obvious, like, overt, almost dramatic way, and I'm not saying that that does not happen, but for some of us, it's not that obvious. Sometimes it looks like watching the numbers climb at the gas pump, and living in California, this is something that I have been doing regularly, and doing the quick calculation of what else that amount was supposed to cover. With the skyrocketing prices of gas, I literally went to get gas this morning because I drove it down to eat, which I normally don't do, but was tired and was like, I'll just do it in the morning. And I'm looking at the fact that I paid $6.69 for a gallon of gas, right? And then multiply that to times how many gallons are in your car when you used to pay $2 less than that. That is significant. That was money that was supposed to cover something else. And sometimes that comes out looking like,
From your calendar, clipboard emoji, weekly content planning starts in
and sometimes that stress doesn't look obvious. It looks like an exhaustion. It's not about being lazy. It's not about not wanting to do work, but it is about dealing with the daily relentless pressure that we have living in times financially that are overwhelming. So I wanted to ground this in something real. And those of you who watch the show know this about me. In March of 2026, there was a study done from the US Food at Home Index. And one of the things that they found is that basically the cost of things are up 1.9% from the previous 12 months. And so looking in recent studies that were done on the national average for gas, for a regular gallon of gas, right? This doesn't get into your mid-range or your premium range gas, that the US average for regular gas right now is $4.45 a gallon. That probably doesn't sound terrible if you live in California because that was what we were paying prior to the skyrocketing prices now. But if you live in a state like, say, Florida, or you live in a state that is down south that does not have the same cost of living as California, 445 is a lot of money to pay for a gallon of gas. And also the USDA has been looking at how much more expensive it is to live. And what they're finding is that about 13.5% of US households, which equals like 18.3 million households, right, across our country, are dealing with food insecurity at some point, and that was in 2024. And they're saying that these numbers help us understand why people are stressed out. If in 2024 that's what we were dealing with, imagine what those numbers probably look like now in 2026 with the current economic strains. We're feeling the weight of survival in every way, embodying it, relationally, we're feeling it, and the body doesn't know the difference between the worry and the sustained threat that we think is coming, right? For a lot of us, our body is responding the way it's supposed to respond because a threat is there, but it can't differentiate between the signal that's giving it the signal to say that there's stress and there's a threat. So I want to be clear with this episode. that this is not about shame. It's not about budgeting tips and then putting spiritual insight on top of it as clothes. It's not about using gratitude practices to make a economic problem feel like it's not there, that it's a mindset issue. It's about naming the affordability stress that we're carrying and what it actually does to our bodies, the family, how it impacts our families, how it impacts our spirit, and how it impacts the table. And so, for those of you who haven't read the book, you don't understand what that concept of the table means, but we're going to try to break it down in this episode. It is about us understanding how the cost of living can create emotional exhaustion. It can create relational friction, and it quietly erodes at the dignity of a person when we don't have a language for what is happening in the community to hold us accountable and also hold us in the middle of this issue. Because when life gets expensive, food is no longer only just food. The meals are not just decisions that you're making. Grocery tips become stress events. Feeding yourself can begin to feel like it's a burden rather than nourishment. And what you find is that gathering together with other people feels harder because of the things that you're carrying. So rest can feel less available for you and somehow less deserved because of what you're going through. This even makes generosity from other people get complicated. Joy feels interrupted by the cost of simply being alive. And so today I wanted to honor what we are going through as a collective. And I want us to sit with that honesty. I want us to talk about what survival stress does to our nervous system, what we inherited at the table from the generations before us, and how that table can become a place of both tension and healing, and what it looks like to care for ourselves and each other when the money pressure is kind of shaping the emotional atmosphere that we have at home. So, we're going to take our first break of the episode, and we will be back to get deeper into understanding what survival stress does to the body and what it does to the spirit. Be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone, to the episode. And we hope that you were inspired and intrigued, and that something that is being said for you during this time is going to motivate you in a way that's going to be helpful. Because I'm really desiring to make sure that these episodes are relevant and not just something that is conceptual. And so we are going to get into understanding the significant impact and the cost of affordability stress. So, one of the hardest things about affordability stress is that it often gets minimized because it's something that is so common, so widespread. People often say every day, everybody's feeling it right now, right? We have these comments that we make about the fact that it's universal. And so because of that, we will boil it down to being, oh, that's just life. It's what you have to do. And while there might be some survival wisdom in that, in those phrases, normalization can also keep us from being honest about naming the emotional and spiritual toil of living under sustained financial strain. Survival stress is not about the numbers. It's about what those numbers do inside your body. Chronic financial pressure can make sleep thinner, meaning you're not getting enough of it and it's not having the impact. It can make the future seem smaller to you, like it's a frame around possibility, but the frame is narrowing. So even when nothing catastrophic has happened, your hope for the future starts to diminish. It can make everyday decisions feel heavier than they actually should and create this persistent low level vigilance that's kind of like an always on scanning for the next thing to happen, where we feel like there is one unexpected expense that is going to come and we're just one away from that, from a situation that we can't recover from. It may be a car repair, medical bill, a child who needs something new for school. It may be a utility bill that jumped up. Any one of us or any one of those things could impact us, right? especially in a season of real strain, it can feel like the floor is falling out from up underneath us. That matters because stress around money and food does not remain contained as a practical issue. It becomes embodied. It lives in the jaw, the stomach, the chest. It shows up and when we're scanning our receipts at the register, how we anticipate the bills when they're arriving, how we second guess small purchases or feel guilty for wanting anything beyond the absolute necessities. It shows up in how our body tightens when someone at the table asks for something extra or they're making a request that they cannot easily fulfill. What is happening is your nervous system doesn't categorize financial stress as less serious than any other type of stress, right? Or threat. One of the things I said is the body doesn't know how to differentiate whether or not you gave a signal that is accurate. The body reads that there's a threat warning given here, and this is what I'm designed to do. And so it reads sustained scarcity the way it reads actual danger. And when the nervous system is under prolonged activation, everything in our lives become harder. Your relationships feel more irritable. You don't have as much patience. You even find your capacity for softness and care with people, being able to be creative, wanting to play and get rest. Like those things get compressed down underneath the weight of constant functional survival mode because that's what we are in. So, in the book, Rooted in Resilience, the chapter on the disruption, I told you all that we talked about that in last week's episode. It really helps us name what is going on with real precision. It talks about capitalism and the fact that it did not just shape our economy, it shaped our very nervous systems. It trained us in urgency, it trained us in extraction, it trained us in hustle, and the profound lie that our worth is located entirely in what we can produce, provide, or endure without complaining. That is exactly why affordability stress becomes so spiritually corrosive over time. It doesn't just pressure, the pressures of the budget, it pressures our identity. It starts whispering that worth must be earned harder than what we're doing. And if we're not doing it hard, then we're not doing it right. That rest is irresponsible. We're telling ourselves that us resting is not what responsible people do. We start believing that softness is a luxury that we haven't earned yet, that there's no room for tenderness until every obligation we have that's financially there on our plate is resolved. But the body doesn't experience this as theory. I wish it did, but it doesn't. The body basically experiences this as I need to be vigilant. And vigilance in the grocery aisle, at the pump, with your children are hungry, when the pantry is low, when the meal is short, or you may not have enough for a meal, or simple pleasures can't be afforded, starts to feel a heavier load. And then coupled with the load is guilt rather than the ease that should be there. Vigilance is coming with every little small thing that you're doing, every small purchase, has an emotional justification you have to do before you make it, and sometimes after. And if we're being honest, for Black people, particularly Black women and caregivers, there's an additional layer that does not get named nearly enough. Survival stress does not arrive alone for us. It arrives alongside the caregiving duties and responsibilities that we have, the image maintenance that we do throughout our life, the community obligations that we have family expectations, and this long inherited and passed down training to make it work no matter what, right? Make a way out of no way. We've heard that. And to look composed while we're doing it. So even when we are appearing fully functional and productive and resilient from the outside, we may actually be living with a level of private sustained strain that is quietly reshaping the emotional texture of our daily experiences. So I want to say this to you all slowly because I think that this is really important. I need it to land. Even when a person looks like they are handling it, they may be carrying something that has not been named, witnessed, or held by anyone else. An unnamed strain doesn't dissolve because it's not named. It relocates inside your body and inside your relationships and inside your day to day. So let's take another break and we are going to come back and we're going to dig a little bit deeper into this. And I want to make sure that this hits home for you I want us to understand some of the things that we've inherited that we often don't realize are sitting with us. And we will be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone. We got into with the second part of the episode at this beginning with looking at some of what we inherited at the table. I know we got into talking about the disruption, but I think it's time for us to look at what we inherited because we did end on that note. And so before we can talk about what the table can hold, I want us to take a moment to talk about what we inherited at the table because none of us arrived at food without the history that goes with it, especially for Black families. We have navigated poverty, we've navigated migration, displacement, and instability across generations. And one of the symbols of that has always been food. Food has always carried more than just the nutrition, it's carried testimony. It has carried survival strategy that has carried low love expressed in form of labor, right? When we think about the recipes that we have in our culture, they are very much a reflection of creativity. We are being creative with these recipes with what they would allow us to have in the face of scarcity. Sometimes it was what they would allow us to be able to purchase. And other times it was we didn't have enough to purchase, but the combination of that equaled scarcity. And our stubborn ancestral insistence of people before us basically said we are going to find a way to feed our children, even when the resources are thin, even when the system is designed to make this nearly impossible. So think about what that took back then. Think about the ingenuity that was required to make a full pot of something nourishing out of what seemed like almost nothing. The creativity they had to use to make Sunday dinner so that it didn't look like it was scarce, right? Even when things were tight, we had to make it look like there was abundance. There was a certain way that dishes were made that still carry people home across decades. So, although these recipes and these traditions started earlier on in our lives, we are seeing them still today. And the way nostalgia shows up can be the very smells that come across in the kitchens from the different meals that we have. We're finding that this is really not just nostalgia, really, it's kind of a survival wisdom that's encoded in our bodies. It is the ancestral intelligence that was passed down from generation through the hands and the kitchens of the people who loved us even before we were born. But I want us to be honest also with what we inherited with that. With that, we also inherited the weight of that table. Some of us grew up at a table where silence was the ruling during hard seasons. You did not have conversations, you did not talk, where adults ate last and sometimes did not eat at all, right? The children could have enough, so you had to sacrifice as the adult. There were times where food was used to comfort emotions that never got spoken aloud, where feeding other people became a way of saying, I love you. I feel like this is still very much culturally a thing for us because we felt like the words, if they were said, felt too exposed or there was not enough time or safety to say them directly. We have learned through these experiences that guilt and scarcity kind of got woven together so tightly that even now, as we are adults in our own households, we're eating well, can carry uh, this sense of something that we didn't earn. We're in better places, but it sometimes feels like under the surface, this faint sense of we did not earn this. So some of us, even now, have learned very early on to minimize our own desires and needs. We learned very early to minimize our own hunger, literally and figuratively. We have learned that expressing need can be a burden to people who love us. And so we absorb the training to perform abundance, even when we were quietly stretched because the alternative means you got to let people know there's a strain. And it felt too much like being exposed. Some of us were handed tables that were full of beauty. These tables had conversations that were rich, where food was abundant, where there was ceremony, where there was care, where gathering together was itself a form of resistance against a world that was designed to isolate and exhaust us, where we learned that sitting down to eat meant claiming something that the system was trying so very hard to take away from us. I will say to you, whatever you inherited, I want you to hold it with some level of compassion today, because the table is where the most intimate stories of our families are stored, and understanding what we absorb there, what we are still carrying from that table, is part of how we will begin to make new choices. So the question is not only how do we manage the current cost of living? The question that I think is a deeper question is, what do I want the table to hold now? Knowing everything that I know and everything that I've been through, what do I need it to hold now? And I feel like that's a question worth sitting with. We're going to take another break and we'll be back to dig a little bit deeper into this episode. Stay with us. Be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone. We are going to get into digging into talking about the table a little bit deeper. And we're going to talk about the table as tension, memory, and medicine, because I feel like it is this beautiful mix and tapestry of a lot of things that hold or being held up in our life. This is where the episode really starts to get deep, right? From a practical and a sacred standpoint. In the book, I talk about the fact that the table's not just furniture. It's a site of memory. It's where we had conversation, we were nourished, and also generational healing happened in that place. The book basically says that the table should be reclaimed as a site of celebration, healing, and intentional gathering. It reminds us that food and family are never about just the consumption. It's about the atmosphere. It's about the care we bring into the room, about the boundaries, the inheritance, and the emotional energy that gets carried to the table way before the food is ever served. That is why affordability stress hits the table so hard. When money is tight, the table's now a space of anxiety. Meals start to feel like evidence of, like a tangible proof of what is or what is not possible in this particular season. There can be tension around the portions, around the choices, around the requests and the expectations, and unspoken calculations can replace ease. Comparison starts to show up, but it shows up in very quiet ways. We're comparing what we used to be able to afford and to offer and what we can do now. And if you grew up at a table where meals were complicated by stress and tension between the adults in the room, there was emotional weight of not having enough, or by the pressure of performing okayness for people outside of the household, it is possible that the current economic situation is reactivating or triggering something in some of us with these older emotional associations. The body is remembering. Remember, we talked about the body keeps the score. The nervous system stores these patterns. And when present, the stress rhymes with the past stress. And the emotional charge is going to feel larger than the immediate situation alone because it's a cumulative process. You're not being dramatic. Your body really is just being thorough. And I keep coming back to this process, or this main point. The table is still powerful, and it's not because there's no strain. It's powerful despite the strain. It's powerful in the middle of strain. The table can be the place where dignity is actually restored. It's not because all your meals are extravagant. It's not because your budget is comfortable. It is because the atmosphere is intentional. And in the book, we talk about the fact that that sacred table doesn't require a large feast. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and a reliable conversation can do the same thing and serve as holy material. And anyone that knows me know I love me a good peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Also, let's think about this. The line that stops you every time you encounter it, right? The fact that you have to realize that scarcity does not have to make it mean that this is not sacred, it is not holy. What we are saying is we're directly refusing the myth that nourishment is only a possibility when we have abundance. It's basically saying that care, attention, and presence are what makes the meal meaningful, not how much. Your spirit within you and at that table is not determined by the bill. It's determined by what we bring into the room, what we are willing to protect in that room, and what we allow to be witnessed and held there. So I'm sure your question now is, what does that mean in practicality, right? How do I do this practically? This is what I'll say. It means that the table can still hold blessings even when the budget is tight. It means meals can still be a moment of witness, not just a transaction for you to get through. Your children can still learn that food is not the only fuel that they get, but also care. That the eating together is not a chore, it's how you build relationship. The table is the place where they are going to be seen. It means families can practice some degree of honesty about the season that they're living through without letting money pressure become the only energy in the room. It means the act of eating together, even simply, even imperfectly, can become a form of grounding, a moment where survival pauses long enough to remember that we are more than what we are enduring. So I think that there's something spiritual in that, something spiritually corrective in a way when we reclaim the table this way. We're basically saying, yes, our survival is real, but it doesn't strip away the tenderness of our room, of our spirit. The food can still carry memory. We can still be grateful. It could even carry repair and healing. We can be honest about the strain without letting the strain dictate for us that it's the only story that's coming out of the inside of our homes. And I think that that matters deeply. Under these prolonged pressures, people begin to relate to one another only through the stress. They stop laughing. They stop lingering after the meals. They stop making room for softness. These things get moved away from the table. We have to get back to the table being the opportunity for us to resist all of these other things in life, even if it's just once a week. Whenever and whatever time and whenever is available for you, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just make sure that while things are hard, that you don't disconnect, that you're not in denial, but you're still being insistent and you're understanding that there's a difference in my insistence and it's going to be the thing that's going to get me through this season. We're going to take another break and we're going to come back with our eye of pause for the episode. Be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone. We are going to go into our Aya pause for this episode. And as usual, you know that I want us to slow ourselves down in this moment, take a deep breath, and we are going to pause to deal with the things that we have on our chest. So, first, I want us to put our hand on our chest, hand on our stomach, and we're going to take a very full, intentional breath in through the nose, hold it and then release it slowly through the mouth. I want us to do it again. Breathe in, hold, release. Breathe in, hold, release. Now, I want you to ask yourself without any judgment and without rushing to fix something, what has survival stress been costing you emotionally? We've talked about the financial part. We've talked about all the other places that it looks that it shows up in our life. I want us to look at the emotional part. Let's look at the relational part. Let's look at the spiritual part. Has it been costing you peace? Has it been costing you patience with people that you love the most? Has it been costing you softness with yourself? Has it been making rest feel like irresponsibility or making delight feel like something that was unearned? Has it been costing you joy around food, around gathering, around the ordinary rituals of daily life? Sit with that for a moment. You do not have to solve anything right now. You do not have to have an answer. You just have to be honest enough to name what it is. Now ask yourself a second question. What do I want the table in my life to carry right now? Do you need it to carry more honesty, more gentleness, more clear boundaries, more gratitude, creativity with what is available? Maybe it's more shared care, more laughter, more silence that's actually restful instead of tense. The eye of pause questions that come from this chapter, the table chapter specifically, are what practices do I want to keep that have come down to me from my ancestors? And what do I want to intentionally change? Another question is what type of energy do I want my table to embody? Those questions matter because they move the conversation from survival panic to intention. They are reminding us that even under real economic strain, we still have some agency over the spirit of the spaces we inhabit. We have this energy that we can bring into rooms where we can eat and gather and rest. So I want you to say this to yourself slowly and let yourself mean it. I am allowed to tell the truth about what survival has been costing me. I'm allowed to need care while I carry responsibility. I am allowed to protect tenderness even in a hard season. I am allowed to seek nourishment, not just endurance. I deserve more than just bare survival. I deserve to be genuinely fed. Take one more breath, let your shoulders soften where they can, and stay here for just a moment. And then we're going to take a break and move a little bit further into the closing out of the episode. We will be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone. And as we close out today, I want to leave this conversation. I don't want to leave it, I should say, at a level of just naming things. So remember, I'm really big on language, identifying and giving language and voice to what's happening, but I don't want to leave it just there. We name things because that's giving witness and that matters. But also, after we name it, we need to put it in praxis. So there needs to be a practice. So I want to leave you with something grounded and actionable because, again, this is the IOA. This is how we move from reflection to application. So the question comes up, what does healing actually look like when life gets expensive? First, it looks like telling the truth about the strain, not the performed version, but the real version. Do not force yourself to call chronic pressure normal when it is quietly draining you season after season. You don't have to be dramatic about it or perform for people, but you do need to name it at minimum to yourself. And when possible, it to at least one person that's safe who can hold it with you without trying to immediately fix it or minimize it. Unnamed stress does not dissolve. What it does is it relocates in your body and it's going to move around from your body to now it manifests in your relationships, in the house, etc. It will find a way to speak if you do not speak it first. The next thing I want you to do is stop treating every financial need like it's a moral failure. If grocery costs, gas prices, childcare, rent, utilities, whatever it may be, have you feeling stretched beyond your capacity, that's not because you're unserious or undisciplined or doing life wrong. It could simply be because the system is just genuinely heavy. We talked about at the top of the show that this is the current conditions. Some of this is not about our lack of or our need to learn certain skills. Some of this is just the weight of the structure is the problem, and it's not a personal issue. We talked about the fact that the conditions that create financial precarity are not neutral, they have a history. So they have communities that they target with intention, and we could have a whole episode about that. But naming that is not a complaint. It's being clear, it's having clarity, and clarity is the beginning of an honest response. The third thing I want you to think about is protecting your emotional atmosphere of your table when you can. This doesn't mean pretending that everything is fine, but it does mean with making a deliberate choice not to let every shared meal that you have only have stress or logistics or a space where tension and calculation is happening. We want you to actually be able to sit down in the moment and be intentional. Bless your food before you eat it. Make contact, eye contact with the people that are around you. Joke about things, right? Don't perform. Have conversations about things other than the problems. You don't need abundance to create warmth. You just need to be intentional about it. The fourth thing I'll leave with you with is make sure that you leave room for shared care. Scarcity thrives in isolation. One of the cruelest things financial pressure does is convince people that their need is shameful, that they are uniquely struggling, that asking for support is a burden or an admission of failure. Community interrupts that lie. Shared care might look like potlucks or meal swaps with neighbors. It might look like your cousin who drops off groceries, right? When they notice that you need assistance. It might look like telling a close friend, honestly, what this season looks like for you and what it feels like for you and letting them actually hear you. It might look like accepting help when it's offered instead of deflecting it with a smile. Shared care is ancestral technology. It was never meant for us to carry this alone, and that was never meant to be optional. Fifth, I will say practice small forms of dignity. Plate the meal, even if it's simple. Light the candle if you have one. Say your grace, whatever expression of gratitude lives in you from a traditional standpoint. Sit down, eat instead of eating emotion, like emotion that you have to do, like it's a practice. Like let it happen. Let the nourishment happen. Do it like it's something that it's there to like there to be cherished instead of this emergency maintenance that we often do. These small acts may appear like they're nothing from the outside, but they do something significant inside of your body. They are a signal to your nervous system that says survival is not all I deserve. I am worth a moment of care. And repeating that signal in small and ordinary ways across ordinary days is one of the best ways that you can begin to rebuild the sense of dignity that prolonged economic pressures quietly erode. Also remember my sixth thing, that food carries memory and it can be medicine. And remember that our bodies, our homes, and our communities are archives of our healing. So the recipes we have, the cooking rituals that we do, the smell of something familiar from our grandmother or grandfather's kitchen, mother's kitchen, right? The act of preparing food with care and attention instead of urgency and exhaustion. These are all ways of staying connected to our lineage, to our identity, to love, even in the middle of a hard time. When you cook something that will feed your children a memory along with the meal, you're doing something that matters more than the price of the ingredients. And finally, I will say do not postpone all the joy in your life until life feels financially resolved. There's a real wisdom in stewardship. So I will caution you being thoughtful about your resources matters, but there's also a real and quietly devastating danger in letting strain teach you that tenderness, beauty, pleasure, delight has to disappear until some imagined future becomes present, until we're comfortable, right? And everything is accounted for. That future may not come in the timeline you expect, or it may not come in the form that you've been waiting for. So let this season include small forms of nourishment now. Don't be extravagant, but nourishment. You don't have to deny what's happening, but you have dignity, not the performance. Have care and care that is real. Because healing in hard times is not about pretending that the pressure is not real. It's about refusing to let pressure define the entire emotional and spiritual atmosphere of your life. It is about insisting that even in this difficult time, that I'm still going to see something worth tending to at my table. So I just want to say thank you so much for being here with me today. Thank you for trusting this space with something that is real, that's personal, that might be heavy and not easy to sit with. It means something to me that you showed up again for this conversation. If this episode spoke to you, I want you to share it. I want you to send it to a friend. I want you to let someone that you know is dealing with things know that we are having relevant conversations on this show that matter, and let them know that, hey, you're not alone in the things that you're going through. And here's a space where we can come together as community and talk about these things. Send it to a person in your circle who has been performing resilience when what they really need to do genuinely is be witnessed. And if you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe to the IOA podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and wherever podcasts are found. Remember to leave a review on Apple Podcasts if you can. Share an episode with someone this week. Every one of those actions is how this show continues to reach people who need it. We will be back next week continuing this arc together. There's plenty more conversations coming that we need to have, and you do not want to miss it. So as you move through the rest of this week, I want to leave you with this. You are not weak because survival feels heavy. You are not failing because life feels expensive. You are not meant to carry practical strain without emotional care. Let the table hold you more. Let the table hold more than stress. Let the meal carry the dignity. Let the room remember tenderness, and let yourself be nourished and not just fed. I'm Dr. Malika, and as we always say here on this show, we are healing loudly together in community so that we can live softly. Until next week, have a great one. This is the IOA Podcast, a space for truth, tenderness, and becoming whole, one breath at a time. Make sure to like and subscribe.